So hello everybody, good afternoon. Welcome back to the EduphoreIAS, the live Hindu analysis class. And today we are starting with today's Hindu itself, that is 22nd of August 2023. तो चलो सबसे पहले हम फ्रंट पेज से स्टार्ट करते हैं, क्विकली देखते हैं क्या इंपॉर्टेंट है आज के न्यूज़पेपर से. तो फर्स्ट अगर हम बात करें तो यू सी नो गवर्नर्स एसेंट फॉर द, जो मणिपुर के गवर्नर हैं, गवर्नर कौन है आपको पता होना चाहिए, अनसुईया यूकी. इन्होंने एसेंट नहीं दिया है फॉर द कन्वीनिंग ऑफ असेंबली सेशन ऑफ द मणिपुर असेंबली. ठीक है, जो कि ऑलरेडी स्टेट कैबिनेट ने रिकमेंड किया था कन्वीन करने के लिए. ठीक है, कंसिडरिंग व्हाट्स गोइंग ऑन इन द मणिपुर. सेकंड है एसी पैनल 6 रिकंस्ट्रक्शन ऑफ लॉस्ट डॉक्यूमेंट्स. आपको नाम पता होना चाहिए कौन हेड कर रहा है इस पैनल को. तो सुप्रीम कोर्ट ने अपॉइंट की थी इस कमेटी को, एंड दिस इज चेयर्ड बाय फॉर्मर जम्मू एंड कश्मीर चीफ जस्टिस गीता मित्तल. ठीक है, सो आपको इतना पता होना चाहिए. एससी टू कॉन्स्टिट्यूट अ न्यू बेंच टू हियर कावेरी वाटर इश्यूज. कावेरी वाटर इश्यूज है डिस्प्यूट बिटवीन द शेयरिंग ऑफ कावेरी वाटर बिटवीन कर्नाटका एंड तमिलनाडु. इसके बारे में हमने एक्सप्लेन टेक्स्ट एंड कॉन्टेक्स्ट पेज जो है उसके जो सेकंड स्मॉलर आर्टिकल होता है उस पर भी हमने डिस्कस किया था 2-3 days बैक. सो देयरफॉर इसमें तमिलनाडु ने पिटीशन फाइल की थी सुप्रीम कोर्ट में कि कॉन्स्टिट्यूट अ बेंच रिक्वेस्टेड बिफोर द बेंच ऑफ दिस ऑनरेबल सीजीआई. सो देयरफॉर CGI said that I will be constituting a new bench for the same. ठीक है, so this is the news. Prime Minister ने कहा है more jobs available in India now, people's income growing and has grown almost 3 times. Fine. Average income of Indians had tripled during his tenure, reflecting a rise in employment opportunities. Fine. तो ये कहा है Prime Minister ने. So these are the important things from the yes, most important is for which we are waiting eagerly, and that is the 23rd of August, that is tomorrow. Tomorrow we are going to have Chandrayaan 3 making landing, finally the lander landing on the south pole of the moon. Fine, the surface of the moon we can say. So we are eagerly waiting for that, actually this landing to be successful. Fine. Okay, in the in this in the same journey, Chandrayaan mission जो है is sending different images from the surface of the moon itself, you can say. So UPSC does like to ask questions related to crater and all, so you need to be aware of what is Haiyan, जिसके की फोटो आपको पिक जो है वो सेंड की है चंद्रयान 3 ने. So Haiyan is nothing but a lunar impact crater next to the northeast limb of the moon. So it's a kind of crater only. ठीक है, we'll be keeping tap on tomorrow's successful landing. Of course, we are all, the whole country is hopeful of this successful landing. Okay, CGI ने पूछा है सरकार से कि if it intends to dictate use of judicial review. थोड़े दिन पहले हमने डिस्कस किया था कि एक सरकार ने, गवर्नमेंट ने एक SOP, that is स्टैंडर्ड ऑपरेटिंग प्रोसीजर रिलीज की थी, prepared by the center to tailor judicial conduct in government related cases. उसमें क्या था कि जैसे देखते हैं हम कोर्ट्स जो हैं DGP लेवल के ऑफिसर को चीफ सेक्रेटरी लेवल कई बार समन कर देती हैं. सो गवर्नमेंट ने ये कहा था कि कोर्ट्स को थोड़ा रिस्ट्रेंट एक्सरसाइज करना चाहिए इन मैटर्स में. ठीक है, बिकॉज इट समवॉट इंटरफेयर्स इन द वर्किंग ऑफ, लेट अस से, और समवॉट takes the administrative works, of course. So from the next page, that is from the city, that is Delhi. So Delhi के page, तो Delhi से जरूर पढ़ लेना. Next you see only the ad or the states page. Next page is states page. So you have lots of politics there only. Okay. So no need to go into that. Then again you have politics only here. So we can safely skip. हाँ, दिस वन इज इम्पॉर्टेंट. इसलिए मैं कहता हूँ कि जो पेजेस हैं स्टेट रिलेटेड पेजेस हैं उसको ऐसे ब्लाइंडली स्किप नहीं करना, बट एक कर्सरी लुक आपने जरूर देना है उसको. बिकॉज यू सी एज मेनी एज 189 ट्राइबल कॉलोनीज इन केरला स्टिल लैक द इंटरनेट एक्सेस. तो जब इंटरनेट एक्सेस की इंडिया में बात करते हो तो आप स्पेशली फॉर द ट्राइबल पॉपुलेशन, तो आप इस डेटा को भी कोट कर सकते हो. ठीक है, फाइन. especially Idukki जो केरला में है place. Idukki has the highest number of tribal colonies cut off digitally from the mainland. ठीक है, so you can see कहीं ना कहीं अभी भी बट केरला का एक बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट प्रोजेक्ट चल रहा है, दैट इज KFON. ठीक है, फाइन. तो आपको ये भी पता होना चाहिए कि इस प्रोजेक्ट कौन रन कर रहा है, किस स्टेट में ये प्रोजेक्ट चल रहा है, तो आपको पता होना चाहिए. ठीक है, as many as 189 Adivasi Uru, that is tribal colonies spread over 12 districts in the state, still have no access to internet and mobile connection. ठीक है, सो आप ये देख सकते हो KFON क्या है, इस केरला फाइबर ऑप्टिक नेटवर्क, अ प्रोजेक्ट एम्ड एट प्रोवाइडिंग फ्री इंटरनेट एक्सेस टू 20 lakh below the poverty line families in the state and providing internet connection at a nominal rate to the public. ठीक है, launched in 2019 and the first phase of the project was commissioned in June 2023. तो इसके बारे में भी पता होना चाहिए हमें. ठीक है, we can use this somewhere in our quote this as an example somewhere in our stat this GS paper. ठीक है, कहीं भी आप इसको कोड कर सकते हो wherever it finds relevance, of course. Finally landed on the editorial page. So most important article for the day, that is the lead article on the editorial page, and that is related to the, you can see the title, BRICS test for Brazil, Russia, India, China and South Africa. 5 countries block test for India's multipolarity rhetoric. So BRICS is the bloc composed of 5 member countries: Brazil, Russia, India, China and South Africa. This year's BRICS summit is going to be held in South Africa from August 22nd today itself to 24th, and our Prime Minister heading for attending this summit. Okay, so that's where writer is talking about BRICS test for India's multipolarity rhetoric. Now what is multipolarity? So multipolarity, उससे भी पहले जाना जरूरी है बाइपोलैरिटी. तो बाइपोलैरिटी, बाय मीन्स टू, सो पोलैरिटी मीन्स जहां पे दो पोल्स की बात करते हैं. इन इंटरनेशनल रिलेशंस बाइपोलैरिटी और बाइपोलर वर्ल्ड मीन्स वेयर द टू पावर शेयरिंग द टू कंट्रीज शेयरिंग द ग्लोबल पावर, लेट अस से चाइना एंड यूएस. बट मल्टीपोलैरिटी में जहां पे 2 से ज्यादा कंट्रीज पावर शेयर कर रही हैं, ग्लोबल पावर. ठीक है, so this is called multipolarity. Rhetoric is nothing but, you can say in simple terms, it's the influential writing or speeches. ठीक है, तो गवर्नमेंट जो इंडिया के फोकस है, that is on multipolarity and not on bipolarity. This is the first thing. Okay, next. तो यही सब मेंशन है इसमें कि हमारे प्राइम मिनिस्टर साहब जा रहे हैं इस समिट को अटेंड करने के लिए. बट बिफोर दैट, once again Delhi is back in the thick of global geopolitics of things, chairing summits. For example, हम G20 के डिफरेंट G20 समिट को चेयर कर रहे हैं सितंबर में, नेक्स्ट मंथ. नेविगेटिंग ट्रिकी Manichaean choices. Manichaean choices is basically Manichaean choices, you can say duality, kind of dual, like duality where you see no clear cut black and white. ठीक है, ducking geopolitical whirlwinds and negotiating a place at the high table of global governance for itself. The upcoming BRICS summit in South Africa from August 22nd to 24 will be an important stress test for Indian diplomacy and a harbinger of the shape of geopolitics to come. Harbinger is, some change is about to happen. Often we say it's some bad, bad or good. So depending on in what context we're talking. So harbinger is basically the okay. Next is, so now writers talk about the ability of the BRICS and how India being members of the BRICS or SCO, and on the other hand how India being member of the Western blocs like G20, G7, even IMF, let us say even UNSC and United Nations bodies as well. So how India is somewhat trying to be neutral or trying to be in the middle of, you can say, that this global geopolitics churn, fine, that is navigating in with the both sets of nations, let us say led by this SCO and of course G7 bloc, this BRICS as well, in which you say the dominance of Russia and China. On the other hand, in the Western blocs like Quad, like United Nations bodies, and now and even international monetary institutions, especially IMF, World Bank. So basically you see there the domination of US, the European countries. So India is in the middle of both these, and of course India is somewhat navigating between these two different blocks, you can say. So for sure, the ability of BRICS to reorder or steer the global economy in any significant manner is deeply suspect. ये पहले ही कह रहे हैं कि this is quite susceptible that BRICS can bring any major change, especially, or the ability of the BRICS is such that it can bring any major change or order, especially at the level of global economy. Because you see, सबसे पहले let us understand the dynamics of BRICS itself. So in BRICS, I said we have Brazil, with which India shares a good relation as such. Let us say, then Russia के साथ भी हमारे ठीक ठाक relations हैं, historically भी अच्छे relations रहे हैं, but considering the current, the Ukraine-Russia conflict and India's stand with respect to Russia, of course, on the one hand, we are trying to balance, which we are trying to be with, not explicitly with the Western countries against, let us say, sanctioning Russia. On the other hand, Russia has become during such times, one of the largest or the leading exporter of petroleum products to India, of course, and has replaced Iraq. So therefore, you see that we are trying to be neutral. We're trying to be balancing the both our economic, our own interest alongside our, this diplomatic interest as well, or geopolitical interest as well. So you see, but there is, confrontation. There is confrontation between the Western bloc and this type of blocks, जहाँ की इंडिया दोनों ही ब्लॉक्स के मेंबर्स हैं. तो इशू क्या है? इशू ये है कि फर्स्टली विद इन द ब्रिक्स इंडिया एंड चाइना के रिलेशंस अच्छे नहीं है, ठीक है, फर्स्ट थिंग. एंड दोनों ही, इवन चाइना, आप देख सकते हो कि चाइना के साथ कितने हमारे अच्छे रिलेशंस हैं आज के टाइम में. यू आर बेटर अवेयर ऑफ दैट. टाइम एंड अगेन वी हैव डिस्कस दैट. सो चाइना के साथ अच्छे रिलेशंस नहीं है विद इन. सो जब दो मेजर कंट्रीज, इंडिया ग्रोइंग लीडर, यू कैन से, चाइना ऑलरेडी challenging the US might. So of course, when two countries cannot grow together, so the issue itself is in the bloc itself. Now the second thing is, apart from this, on the other side you see the ability of course, because somewhere जब चाइना इंडिया साथ नहीं चल सकते, तो of course somewhat it puts a question mark on the global economy, because we are one of the largest, fastest growing economy in the world. And China is somewhat facing currently the issues with its growing, this growing dynamics, you can say. So its appetite to create, the BRICS appetite to create economic agreements amongst its own members is limited, and its historical capability to influence global geopolitics overestimated. Fine. So पहले तो राइटर क्लियर कर रहे हैं कि इसकी कैपेसिटी, इसकी एबिलिटी को कहीं ना कहीं हमने ओवर एस्टिमेट किया है, both in economic sense as well as in geopolitical sense. And as a bloc, it is hardly an attractive investment destination, that is BRICS itself. Apart from that, more so because BRICS today sounds more revisionist and reactive than proactive or clear-headed on what it wants to do. So he is saying कि जो BRICS है today, it seems more of a revisionist. Revisionist क्या होता है कि revisionist is a country, let us say, or a global power which believes in changing the status quo that is actually believed to be by the Western nations. Okay? Especially here talking about China. And yet it could going forward become an entity capable of influencing the future of world politics. Which entity we are talking about? Of course, BRICS. So the geopolitical development of the past year or so and the challenges faced by the United Nations system may have given another lease of life to BRICS. After all, is also more globally represented. BRICS is more globally represented than the UN Security Council and the G7, though less than G20, which is dominated by the West. In that sense, the choices that BRICS makes at the summit, that is in the next 2 days, and thereafter could have major implications for the international system. Okay? So there is much which depends on what outcomes we see out of this summit. Okay? Whatever decisions the leaders are taking, so much depends on that and how it is going to have its implication on the overall global order. many paths to global governance. That global governance has failed or that it reeks of deeply undemocratic practices needs no reputation. बिल्कुल ठीक बात है. The UN system जो है almost, especially United Nations Security Council, वहाँ पे 5 permanent members हैं. को पता है चाइना, रशिया, फ्रांस, यूएस एंड यूके. तो आप वहाँ भी देख सकते हो कि एक टेबल पे सारे नहीं बैठ सकते, डिसीजन नहीं हो पाता बिकॉज रशिया यूएस के रिलेशंस ठीक नहीं है, चाइना ऑफ कोर्स यूएस के रिलेशन ठीक नहीं है. सो ऑफ कोर्स देयर टू UNSC somewhat has become a failed body today. So if the deeply unrepresentative character of the global governance institution, especially led by the West, and mechanism has led to their failure, and there is little possibility of more inclusive system anytime soon, forums such as BRICS will invariably fill such important institutional vacuum. क्यों? क्योंकि इसमें जो countries हैं, let us say BRICS, Brazil, Latin American nation or South American, see the continent, then you have Russia, then you have China, India, of course India, from South Asia, then you have China, and then you have South Africa itself from African continent. So more or less developing countries, fine, all of these are developing countries plus somewhat of course so and comparing these 5 countries somewhat going to be the future world powerhouses, fine. So therefore they have both the potential capabilities to somewhat play a decisive role in a global governance, and therefore the blocks itself led by them. So the 40 odd countries have formally or informally expressed interest in joining an expanded BRICS. तो आप समझ सकते हो कि अभी 5 कंट्रीज हैं लेकिन 40 ऐसे कंट्रीज हैं जिन्होंने इंटरेस्ट डायरेक्टली और इनडायरेक्टली शो किया है इन ज्वाइनिंग ब्रिक्स. It is reflective of the deeply held sense of angst and anger in the global south countries about their place in the world. So global south are basically the developing countries, or you can say जब आप इक्वेटर से नीचे की कंट्रीज को देखते हो, especially global south में आपकी South American, Southern American countries, then of course African countries, then you have of course this association of Southeast Asian nation, even all of the countries which are actually developing ones or least developed ones, fine, including India as well. And India of course wants to be the leader of this global south. So at a time of global geopolitical uncertainty led by, let us say, Ukraine-Russia conflict, led by not that good relation between of course even India and China, and even US and China, so these are all signs of geopolitical uncertainty. With the global order going through a major churn, middle powers, regional heavyweights, and the outliers that are weighing their options, exploring where they belong or trying to belong where they can, would want to utilize forums such as BRICS to make sense of global geopolitical headwinds. Of course, so these are the countries, the global south countries or the developing countries actually are trying to make it, or trying to they are assessing that to which group they should belong to for their own development, or let us say pursuing their own interest, hedge or place their bets upon and influence the geopolitics around them. For instance, the uncertainties arising out of the Ukraine war and the steady rise of China have clearly provided a new lease of life to the otherwise moribund BRICS. ठीक है, सो इन सब ने यूक्रेन रशिया की कन्फ्लिक्ट हो या चाइना की राइज हो, कहीं ना कहीं ब्रिक्स को एक न्यू लीज ऑफ लाइफ दी है, अकॉर्डिंग टू द ऑथर. नॉट दैट ब्रिक्स और द शंघाई, रिमेंबर ब्रिक्स को पहले हम शंघाई कोऑपरेशन ऑर्गेनाइजेशन नाम से और द शंघाई कोऑपरेशन ऑर्गेनाइजेशन, शंघाई दैट इज एससीओ, not this, but Shanghai 5 के नाम से जानते थे पहले हम SCO को initially. So these are the two blocks actually headed by or led by, you can say, these countries जहाँ पे रशिया, this China and India की आपको presence देखने को मिलती है. ठीक है, so these are the two blocks especially led by these countries. So this SCO and or his SCO, or you can say either BRICS, will lead to truly democratic global governance or multipolarity. Perhaps nothing can. These forums too are replete with competing interests, for example between China and India, calculations including inbuilt or unsaid hierarchies, and yet these very forums could ignite a genuine conversation on making global governance more representative and inclusive. No doubt, इनके अपनी ही internal conflicts हैं. For example, India and China doesn't share good relation today, but still they have, they can ignite a genuine conversation related to the global geopolitics and global governance, as they have the ability and capability. So in global governance, more imperfect institutions reflecting the realities of today are better than one imperfect institutional structure that is alien to the world of today. Basically, he is talking about the UNSC and United Nations respective organizations. International politics should not be the place for hegemonic perfection, but of democratic imperfection. ठीक है, सो देखो यहाँ से सीधे सीधे यूपीएससी क्वेश्चन उठा के पूछ सकती है कि इंटरनेशनल पॉलिटिक्स जो है शुड नॉट बी द प्लेस फॉर हेजेमोनिक परफेक्शन बट ऑफ डेमोक्रेटिक इम्परफेक्शन. स्पेशली ये क्वेश्चन इंपॉर्टेंट हो जाता है पीएसआईआर ऑप्शनल के लिए, ठीक है, जहाँ पे हम इंटरनेशनल पॉलिटिक्स थ्योरी पढ़ते हैं, इंटरनेशनल पॉलिटिक्स ज़्यादा पढ़ते हैं. ठीक है, दिस इज हाउ द क्वेश्चंस कैन बी फ्रेम्ड फॉर द फाइनल एग्जाम. Now Delhi के dilemma क्या है? We have discussed about the role the BRICS and SCO could play. What exactly is the Delhi's dilemma now? So I have already mentioned you that we are the members of both SCO and this BRICS. We are also members of somewhat we have been invited as a and we have attended in the last 3-4 years G7 meetings as well. We are heading, we are chairing the summit of G20. We are also the part of United Nations this system or United Nations itself, United Nations systems or organizations, different organizations. So somewhat you don't see that these two has been, somewhat standing against each other, isn't it? Because one set of groups or blocks being led by countries and the other by the different countries. So of course, one side you say BRICS and SCO being led by Russia and China, and other especially led by the US and G7, G20 and the European nations. So both of them are somewhat against each other, isn't it? So that's the issue, and that's the real dilemma of Delhi, that how to navigate in such kind of situations of dilemmas. Fine. Because at times it has been asked that, for example, where does India belong in the global geopolitical landscape? There another question at times being asked and often repeated question is, how can India be part of the Quad, that is Australia, Japan, the US and India itself, the 4 members, G20, G7 and BRICS, SCO and Global South at the same time? Isn't it? This seems to be contradictory. Fine, but of course that is the achievement of our diplomacy, that we are part of both, either though the members are opposing each other somewhat, let us say West and China and Russia don't share good bonds, don't good relation today, but somewhat India has been able to navigate between these two contradictory blocks or opposing blocks. So there is that is deeply a historical view, that why India cannot be the part of them, all of them simultaneously. India's active participation, if you see, in non-Western multilateral forums such as BRICS, SCO and the Global South must also be seen as India's response to the undemocratic and inequitable governance structures of the post-Second World War institutions such as IMF, World Bank and the UNSC. इंडिया हर बार कहता है कि यूएनएससी की मेंबरशिप परमानेंट मेंबर बनाया जाए इंडिया को, लेकिन इंडिया को अभी तक परमानेंट मेंबर नहीं बनाया गया है. ठीक है, ब्राजील, G4 countries, Japan, Brazil, Germany, India wants to be the permanent members of this UNSC, but they have not yet got this permanent membership. At the same time, India's objective is not and should not be to create or belong to an anti-US or West bloc either. Of course, that won't be in our interest. So developmentally, historically, geographically, अगर हम बात करें तो India in all these three things, development front, historical and geographically, belongs to BRICS, SCO and the Global South. But India does not only belong to them, more so China's overwhelming presence in them makes it a less than perfect geopolitical choice for India. So developmentally, historically and geographically, India belongs to SCO and BRICS, but structurally and aspirationally. The G20, G7 Quad and the like are where New Delhi is headed. So you can see. But India's accommodation in the most influential among those forums is a long shot. India, as a result, is located right in the middle of an emerging geopolitical fault line with the interest on either side, welcomed by either side, but fully belonging to neither side. You see how beautifully he has written the article. Fine. So India belongs to both the sides, but at times India is not on the either side. Okay. So of course, practicing our neutrality. So this could either make India. So इस केस में होता क्या है, जब आप दो के बीच में फंसते हो तो होता क्या है, it will either make India a bridge between the great divides, ठीक है, or its lack of loyalty to neither could make it a victim of emerging geopolitical contestations between the two opposing kind of blocs. Fine? या तो फायदा बहुत होगा या फिर नुकसान भी होगा. The sharper the fault line becomes, the harder it will be for New Delhi to balance it. Of course, because then we might be asked to take a stand against one bloc, and that won't be in favor of our interest. So one of the major dangers of current churn in global geopolitics is the rise of competing blocs in the international system. That is the rise of competing blocs, with China and Russia aligning their global interests. The organizations they are part of, whose membership they are attempting to enhance, are likely to be pitted against the status quo order led by the US and its allies. So of course you see again the emergence of contestation or blocs, fine, on one side led by the US and its allies, Western nations and European nations, and on the other side you see the alignment of Russia and China. So India has traditionally opposed creation of blocs as they go against the fundamental spirit of equitable global governance and multipolarity. So multipolarity in the Indian historical imagination is about equity, inclusion and representation, not bloc rivalry, ideological or otherwise. So this is what India historically believes about, of multipolarity as equity, inclusion and representation, but not a bloc rivalry. However, even if New Delhi vehemently opposes bloc politics, it will continue to get drawn into it. Because considering the nature of our engagement with these countries, of course, even though we don't want to be seen as being a member of one bloc and pitting against another, still naturally will be drawn to the in such kind of situation or scenarios. So it's tough diplomacy test for us. The China question now. The question that New Delhi or Delhi or India must ask every step of the way as it pursues a multipolar world and an alternative mechanism for global governance is. So इसमें ये बात करते हैं कि देखो कहीं ना कहीं अगर इंडिया स्ट्रेंथन करता है ब्रिक्स को या एससीओ को, तो इससे फायदा किसको होने वाला? चाइना को, बिकॉज चाइना इज सिटिंग ओवर देयर. अगर चाइना वेस्टर्न नेशंस के साइड जाता है इंडिया सपोज, सो एंड कैसे आज के टाइम में एक बड़ी ही न्यू चीज आपको देखने को मिलती है, दैट इज इंटरनेशनलाइजेशन ऑफ रुपीज. हम डी डॉलराइजेशन की ग्लोबली बात कर रहे हैं कि जो डॉलर है दैट इज अ हार्ड करेंसी ऑफ द वर्ल्ड, जिसमें कि मेजरली आप देखते हो ट्रेड होता है इंटरनेशनली एंड सेटलमेंट होती है ट्रांजेक्शन एंड ऑल इन डॉलर्स. सो द वर्ल्ड इज टुडे टॉकिंग अबाउट डी डॉलराइजेशन एंड इंडिया इज वन अमंग देम. So this de-dollarization would then going to ultimately benefit the China itself. Why so? Because no doubt a multipolar world requires a strong alternative global forums and perhaps even attempts at de-dollarization. But those very forums will go on to aid the rise of China and the strengthening of the yuan, the Chinese currency. So to think of de-dollarization would lead to strengthening of the rupee is delusional, as is the belief that China and India share larger geopolitical interest. तो ये मानना कि de-dollarization की वजह से इंडियन रुपी स्ट्रेंथन होगी, ये सेम वैसा ही है जैसा ये मानना कि चाइना एंड इंडिया share larger geopolitical interest. Fine. They may find value in the instrumental utility of the non-Western institutions, but their end goals are fundamentally divergent. बिल्कुल ठीक बात है, इंडिया एंड चाइना साथ नहीं चल सकते, ठीक है, because both are global aspirations, I mean emerging powerhouse. So given its size, economic influence and the spread of the Belt and Road Initiative and diplomatic bandwidth, China will influence an expanded BRICS and India with its limited resources would struggle to match this. बिल्कुल ठीक बात है. Paradoxically and perhaps tragically, the more India helps strengthen non-Western institutions and framework, thereby weakening the post-Second World War order, the more it helps, albeit indirectly, China's revisionist agenda. तो सी ज़्यादा से ज़्यादा अगर हम स्ट्रेंथन करेंगे नॉन वेस्टर्न इंस्टीट्यूशन को, स्पेशली ब्रिक्स एंड एससीओ को, इट मीन्स इनडायरेक्टली वी आर स्ट्रेंथनिंग द राइज ऑफ चाइना, विच इज नॉट अगेंस्ट, विच इज नॉट इन फेवर ऑफ इंडियाज राइज. ठीक है, so that's the kind of paradoxical situation India is facing today. So the challenge before India is to choose between a China-centric world order or a West-centric world order. That's the choice to be made, or balance the two. So of course we'd like to balance the two. If the latter is too preachy for India, the former is too Machiavellian, and balancing is going to get tougher. Of course. India must therefore keep its eyes firmly fixed on its goal. So what India, aims for: promote a more representative and equitable global governance on the one hand, and ensure that such an order does not end up undercutting its own national interests on the other. This is what the best we can pursue at this moment of global churn, okay, without being labeled as taking side of the either side of the blocks. India must moderate the influence of China in non-Western forums. In doing so, it must also make sure not to alienate other countries in the global south who may see merit in China's efforts at expanding the membership of those forums. So this is the major challenge. ऐसा नहीं होना चाहिए कि हम ग्लोबल साउथ हैं, जो कंट्रीज के साथ हमारे रिलेशंस अच्छे हैं, उनको भी हम चाइना को अपोज करने के चक्कर में एलिनिएट कर दें, वो भी हमारे से दूर हो जाए. ठीक है, सो ऑफ कोर्स चैलेंजिंग टफ टाइम वी आर फेसिंग. So geopolitical predicament this poses before Delhi is hardly an easy one to navigate. Asserting itself in non-Western global forums such as BRICS and the SCO, checking the steadily growing Chinese influence in them, and dealing with Western normative expectations while negotiating a place for itself in Eurocentric forums such as the UNSC and G7, it must do all this simultaneously. So you have no option or choice to make, let us say, separate choices, but we need to do business simultaneously, fine, taking into account both the sides of the what, let us say, both the faces of a dice. So therefore we need to balance all these, fine, opposing blocks. At the same time we need to do all this simultaneously, एक साथ करना हो. Okay, so therefore a very good, a masterpiece article written by Happy Man Jacob. So you see he is the he teaches at the School of International Studies, Jawaharlal Nehru University, JNU Delhi, and is a founder of the Council for Strategic and Defense Research. Happy Man Jacob, very good article. You must read and revise the same. There are lots of fodder that we can use actually in our what yes papers, of course. Next is about, you can see there is a one spat going on in on the public forum, let us say, especially in the social media, and that is between our IT ministry and of course the former RBI governor Raghuram Rajan. Okay, and what is that issue? So the issue is related to the smartphone manufacturing in India. Mr. Rajan has said that India is not actually manufacturing or producing mobile phone, but only assembling. Fine. Remember, even Foxconn, a great world leader, of course, you can say in technology, even assembles iPhones. Okay? Even China assembles iPhones. You can see made in China. Right? Fine. But let us first talk about the issues. So over the last few months, former RBI Governor Raghuram Rajan and the Minister of State for Electronics Rajiv Chandrasekhar have sparred over how well a central government scheme here is PLI to boost electronics manufacturing has been faring. What happened? It started when, चलो इसमें जाने की जरूरत नहीं है कि क्यों ऐसा हुआ, but quickly let us have a look. It started when Mr. Rajan along with two other economists released a brief discussion paper. So Mr. Rajan and along with two economists एक paper इन्होंने discussion paper release किया arguing that program isn't really pushing India towards becoming a self-sufficient manufacturing powerhouse. Program and scheme that we are talking about is nothing but PLI, production linked incentive. I am coming to that. What's that? So instead the government is using taxpayer money to create an ecosystem of low-level assembly jobs that will still depend heavily on the imports. The junior IT minister responded sharply, calling the paper a concoction of half-truths built on shoddy comparisons. Okay? So of course, government is को deny करेगी. What is the truth? Let us check it out. So what is the PLI scheme? Around 5 years ago, means in the year what? 18. So around 5 years ago, the government of India decided it wanted more companies to make things in India. And of course, you see before that we have a program called Make in India as well. So manufacturing is a key ingredient to economic growth and also comes with what economists call a multiplier effect. Why so? Because manufacturing sector only can provide permanent employment, right? Not services like gig and all. Every job created and every rupee invested in manufacturing has a positive cascading effect on other sectors in the economy. So that's why it has multiplier effect, fine, of manufacturing sector. However, the problem was that many industries didn't want to set up shop in the country. So India's infrastructure isn't great, the country's labor laws are archaic, and the workforce isn't very skilled. So you can take these 3 points as the downsides or why the global companies actually didn't want to set up their factories or shops in India. To solve this all, government uses a carrot and stick approach. The stick is raising import duties and thus making it more expensive for companies to import stuff from somewhere else and sell it in India. And the carrot, that is the incentive, is to provide subsidies and incentives. One key set of incentive is the PLI, that is production linked incentive. It is an incremental kind of, here the government gives money to foreign or domestic companies that manufacture goods here. The annual payout is based on a percentage of revenue generated for up to 5 years. Fine. So the industry has shown the most enthusiasm for the scheme is smartphone manufacturing. Companies like Micromax, Samsung and Foxconn, which makes phones for Apple, can get up to 6% of their incremental sales income through the PLI program. So हुआ क्या कि with the scheme mobile phone exports jumped from just $300 million in financial year 2018 to an astounding, you can say, $11 billion in financial year 23. You can see in the last 5 years, from $300 million, we are exporting today mobile phones worth $11 billion. Right? So of course, it's an astounding, it's a massive achievement, you can say. While India imported mobile phones worth $3.6 billion in financial year 2018, it dropped down to $1.6 billion in financial year 23. I mean, if you see this data, this stat, somewhat this is what actually we wanted to achieve, isn't it? To export more and import less. Central government minister, including Mr. Chandrasekhar, the junior IT minister, have regularly cited this data as a proof of PLI scheme success. Fine, हमें भी on the face of it यही लग रहा है कि ये भी ठीक है. But what Mr. Rajan is arguing, so in his paper, the former RBI governor said that the export boom hides more than it reveals. Specifically, Mr. Rajan contended that while imports of fully put together mobile phones have come down, the imports of mobile phone components, including display screens, cameras, batteries, printed circuit boards, shot up between financial year 21 and 23. वो कहने की मान लेते हैं कि मोबाइल फोन्स, आपकी मोबाइल फोन्स जो हैं have come down, imports of fully put together means complete जो बना हुआ एकदम फाइनल प्रोडक्ट मोबाइल फोन, उसकी जो इंपोर्ट है वो कम हुई है. बट कहीं ना कहीं इंडिया में फाइनेंशियल 21-23 के बीच में ये देखने को मिला है अकॉर्डिंग टू हिज रिसर्च पेपर कि जो कंपोनेंट्स हैं फॉर मोबाइल फोन्स और रॉ मटेरियल जो इनपुट्स यूज हो रहे हैं वो कहीं ना कहीं हमें बढ़ते हुए नजर आ रहे हैं. फॉर एग्जांपल डिस्प्ले स्क्रीन्स, कैमरास, बैटरी एंड प्रिंटेड सर्किट्स. Incidentally, these are the same 2 years when mobile phone exports jumped the most. This matter because manufacturers aren't really making mobile phones in India in the traditional sense. That would involve their supply chain also moving to India and making most of the components here as well. So all that the companies are doing, Mr. Rajan said, is importing all of the necessary equipments, parts, and assembling them in India to create made in India product. So they are not actually producing in a traditional sense, not making full-fledged mobile phones in India or the component parts, rather they are importing the component parts and then assembling only in India. So this is what he said. So what minister is saying? But this is important what Mr. Rajan said, as low-level assembly work doesn't produce well-paying jobs and doesn't nearly have anywhere the same multiplier effect that actual manufacturing might provide. So that's the issue. Then what is the minister's reply? Mr. Chandrasekharan's argument is twofold. First, Mr. Rajan wrongly assumed that all imports of screen, batteries, etc. are used to make mobile phones. It is possible that these items are used also for computer monitors, DSLR, cameras, electric vehicles, etc. So he argued that not all mobile phone production in India is supported by the PLI scheme, only around just 22% so far. Okay? So not all production line of the mobile phones has been supported by this PLI scheme, but just 22%. Minister's overarching point is that the import dependency isn't as bad as Mr. Rajan says it is. That said, the minister has admitted that the value addition, how much work an Indian mobile production plant is actually doing in creating the finished product, that is coming up with a full-fledged mobile phone for mobile manufacturing, is probably low, but he added it will go up as the broader supply and assembly chain settles in India. Right? So minister has accepted to a certain extent the notion as well, but he has also now criticized Mr. Rajan as well. So who is right? To his credit, Mr. Rajan accounted for this critique in his initial paper. In a reply to the ministers last week, he argued that even if only 60% of imports are used for production, India's net exports will still be negative. That is, even if only 60% of the screens, batteries, etc. are used to make mobile phones, the final import tally जो है would still beat the final exports tally. ठीक है? क्योंकि आप 60% of the imports अगर components कर रहे हो, तो of course your net exports would be less than your net imports. So the main divide is between the two is over whether the PLI program will be able to create long-lasting jobs and formally establish India as a manufacturing powerhouse and supply hub that adds value to the production process. The minister believes that it will take time for the project's results to show. On the other hand, Mr. Rajan believes that without proof of PLI success, there is an opportunity cost. After all, every rupee spent in PLI payment is money that would have gone into improving, say, the education system, an investment that would also help the Indian economy. So he is saying that whatever incentives you are providing to the the companies, we need to check it out whether that would have been provided or invested in the education sector. That would have been much better with the and would have helped the Indian economy instead of giving money to the companies under PLI. So these are the different grounds of their this question. So what are the concerns about drilling in the North Sea? North Sea सबसे पहले आपको prelims point of view से इसकी location पता होनी चाहिए. PLI scheme भी बहुत important है. Find the upcoming mains exam as well, because lots of news is revolving around this only, PLI and all. So that's how it becomes important, because repeatedly you see PLI has been in news. So North Sea आपको पता होना चाहिए. It is located in the northern side of Europe and therefore it is a part of Atlantic Ocean. सबसे पहले तो prelims के लिए आपको एक location पता होना चाहिए, and alongside that you should also be aware of the countries actually sharing the border of North Sea. Okay, so this is for the prelims. Apart from that, what is the news here? So UK Prime Minister जो है ऋषि सुनाक recently backed plans for new fossil fuel drilling off Britain's coast, worrying the environmental experts even as the world continues its stride towards irreversible climate change. ठीक है? So हो क्या रहा है कि कहीं ना कहीं UK कोशिश कर रहा है कि ऑफ ड्रिलिंग करने की ब्रिटेन्स कोस्ट पे नियर नॉर्थ सी. So according to an official statement, the move will help Britain become more energy independent. The North Sea Transition Authority, responsible for regulating oil, gas and carbon storage industry, expects the first of the new license to be awarded in autumn, with the round expected to be awarded over 100 licenses in total. So कौन लाइसेंस ग्रांट करता है आपको पता होना चाहिए, दैट इज NTSA, दैट इज नॉर्थ सी ट्रांजिशन अथॉरिटी, ठीक है। जैसे इंटरनेशनल सी बेड एसोसिएशन है जो कि ओशन ड्रिलिंग के लिए, स्पेशली सी बेड ड्रिलिंग के लिए लाइसेंस प्रोवाइड करता है, वैसे ही ये है फॉर द नॉर्थ सी। सो व्हाट इज द हिस्ट्री ऑफ ड्रिलिंग देयर? Geographically, the North Sea lies between England and Scotland on its west, Netherlands and Belgium. So all these countries have been mentioned which shares border either form with the this North Sea. So North Sea की अगर देखोगे तो lies between England and Scotland on its west side, Netherlands, Belgium and France on its southern side, and Norway, Denmark and Germany on its side. So how many countries are there? 3, 4, 5, 6 and 8. The 1958 Geneva Convention on the Continental Shelf was the first international legislation to establish the rights of countries over the continental shelves adjacent to their coastline, paved the way for exploration in the North Sea. So basically shelves में आपको generally आपको natural resources काफ़ी देखने को मिल जाते हैं, fossil fuel especially. So that's why the UK is interested in such kind of drilling. The first license for exploration in the UK North Sea was awarded to British Petroleum BP in September 1964. So this is not the first time that such things are going to happen. ठीक है, so पहले भी ऐसा हो चुका है. Apart from that, why is offshore drilling problematic? This is the more interesting question that we should be aware of. So according to the US-based advocacy group Natural Resource Defense Council (NRDC), offshore drilling puts workers, waters and wildfire at risk. 3 W's, that is workers, waters and wildfire at risk. Offshore drilling की बात कर रहे हैं, ना कि onshore. So drilling in seas and oceans for fossil fuel not only aggravates the threat of climate change but also warms ocean and raises sea levels. So these are the downsides of this drilling. Offshore drilling जो है, this is associated with basically a direct risk to marine biodiversity as well as with indirect risk to coral reefs, shellfish and the marine ecosystem from acidic waters because of carbon pollution settling into oceans out of the drilling exercise. Okay, so of course this is not good for the marine biodiversity. So what about climate commitments? In its March 2023 progress report on the UK Parliament, the Climate Change Committee of the US advises the UK and developed governments on emissions targets, said that the UK has not adequately prepared for climate change under the second National Adaptation Program. ठीक है, जैसे NDCs हैं, जैसे इंडिया भी प्लेज ने भी किया है, वैसे UK जो है वो नेशनल एडेप्टेशन प्रोग्राम जो है वो रन कर रहा है. So in the UK National Adaptation Program are statutory programs that the government must follow to help. So these are legal statutory programs, National Adaptation Program, that the government must follow to help prepare the country for climate change as required under the Climate Change Act. Fine. And this act is meant or covering the period between 2018 to 23, the second National Adaptation Program of the UK. So as per the CCC report, Climate Change Committee report, there is very limited evidence of the implementation of adaptation at the scale needed to fully prepare for climate risk. Fine. So this is what negatively picturized case को कि कहीं ना कहीं जो UK करने जा रहा है वो ठीक नहीं है environment के लिए. According to the Climate Action Tracker से related prelims 20 especially आपके prelims 2022 में मेरे ख्याल क्वेश्चन भी आया था एक Climate Action Tracker. UK's climate action is not consistent with the Paris Agreement. Although its overall rating is almost sufficient, UK's nationally determined contribution, जिसकी मैं बात कर रहा था, and long-term targets do not represent a fair share of the global efforts to address climate change. So licensing for drilling in North Sea, especially for new oil and gas extraction plan, is incompatible with the 1.5 degrees Celsius limit to rise in temperature as per the Climate Action Tracker website. ठीक है, तो that's the issue कि कहीं ना कहीं climate change action जो प्लेज किया है कंट्रीज ने उसमें ये एक बाधा बन सकता है. ठीक है, बिकॉज फॉसिल फ्यूल की एक्सट्रैक्शन पे या ड्रिलिंग पे जो फोकस है दैट्स नॉट गुड फॉर द ओवरऑल क्लाइमेट मीटिंग क्लाइमेट गोल्स. So SC panel flags already discussed कर चुके हैं. This panel has been led by Justice Geeta Mittal, former CJ of Jammu Kashmir High Court. More or less you see politics here. So all eyes on Xi and Modi meet as PM reaches South Africa today. We have discussed BRICS summit that is going to be held between today on 24th of this month. Public should be holding lawmakers accountable for conduct in house, said by our speaker Om Birla ji. More jobs available, people moving to higher income groups. This is said by Prime Minister. Fine. So according to ITR filing के बेस पे इन्होंने कहा है the average income which was around 4 lakh in 2014 has increased to around 13 lakh in 2023. You can see according to income tax return data, the average income has increased from 14 lakh to 13 lakhs. Interesting. The number of those who have moved from the lower income group has also increased. Okay, so this is okay. Final further you see he says that every rupee of their tax was being spent for the development of the country. The economy, which was at the number 10 spot before 2014, had reached number 5 in September 2022 development. ठीक है, टीचर रिक्रूटमेंट की बात कर रहे हैं प्राइम मिनिस्टर जी, रोजगार मेला एंड ऑल. तो यू कैन सी ICSSR, that is Indian Council of Social Science Research, is going to develop Indianized research methodology tools. 500 researchers will get funding for the studies based on fieldwork focused on geographical region. This is a good, initiative by the ICSSR. Okay. So you can see there is a panel constituted by the government for taking steps to curb stress in reality sector. Fine. So identifying financial viability as the primary reason for stress in real estate projects. Expert committee headed by former Niti Aayog CEO Amitabh Kant has said judicial intervention such as the use of the insolvency and bankruptcy code should be used only as a last resort in case of stalled housing projects. So इतना ही sufficient है. आप whenever you are writing something in your GS3 economy section related to reality sector and all, you can mention the name of this committee alongside this committee's recommendations. कि IBC जो है as a judicial intervention should be used as a measure of last resort. India must maintain close watch on new variants of COVID-19. So game is not yet over. Finally, we are on the world page. Not that important. So Ecuadorians reject oil drilling in the Amazon in historic decision. ठीक है, जैसे हमने अभी ऑयल ड्रिलिंग की बात की नॉर्थ सी में, वैसे ही इक्वेडर ने बेसिकली कंट्री जो है इसने voted on Sunday against the oil drilling in of a protected area, especially in the Amazon, that is the home to 2 uncontacted tribes and serves as a biodiversity hotspot. Fine. So Amazon जो है important environmentally, especially from अगर हम बात करें तो ट्राइबल पॉपुलेशन के लिए. And finally, amid air traffic, okay, air traffic, India ASEAN, okay, this is important. India ASEAN Association of Southeast Asian Nations agreed to review goods trade pact by 2025 to fix asymmetry. Fine, कि हम ज़्यादा import करते हैं उन countries से, so therefore it is, you see, a joint committee of the ASEAN India Trade in Goods Agreement signed in 2009 deliberated on the roadmap for the review of the pact and finalized the terms of reference for the fresh negotiations ahead of ASEAN India Economic Ministers meeting held in Indonesia on Monday. Fine. So this is important because India is on, on a spree to conclude, let us say, more of the FTAs with the respective countries. So of course we are moving in this direction to conclude this, not exactly FTA, but of course to review this pact which was done in the year 2009, which is somewhere leading to asymmetry, means we are importing more from them and they are importing less, or let us say the gap between exports and imports. Fine. Finally, we have landed on the sports page, and so that's it probably for the day. Yes. Okay, so that's it from my side for the as far as the Hindu discussion is concerned. But before we finally conclude our class, let us quickly have a look at the today's question based on today's discussion only. So you can see these questions. You need to solve it. We'll be discussing the same tomorrow. So take it as your homework. First is, consider the following statement: the Kaveri is an interstate basin that originates in Tamil Nadu and passes through Karnataka and Pondicherry. Second statement: the Harangi and the Hemavati dams in Karnataka have been constructed on the tributaries of the rivers Kaveri. You need to choose the correct option and you need to write subjective answer as well. And this is, what are the key features of the production linked incentive scheme that we discussed, and why are low level assembly jobs not good in the long run? You need to write it in 250 words for 15 marker. Okay, so 15 marks. So that's it from my side for the day. If you have any query, anything, you can put the same in the comment section. Until then, take care, keep revising, and stay tuned for the tomorrow's Hindu analysis. Thank you.